Welcome to Making Money. This is Matt McCall. Thanks for joining me. It's Thursday, April 6, 2023. Got a very special interview for you, something that's very personal to me. Bringing on my personal doctor, Dr. Daniel Karlsberg from the Princeton Longevity Clinic. You can see his credentials. We're going to put those across the screen. We're going to talk about my experiences I've had there over the last couple of years and dive into the future of healthcare, how artificial intelligence, how genomics, how precision medicine is changing one of the biggest industries in the world right now. And we're going to show you firsthand, folks. We're going to show you my actual 3D heart, break it down, show the plaque in the arteries, and talk about the process that I went through, why I went through it, what it told me about my body, what it told me about my health situation, and really how it can help and change the future of everybody on earth. And it was such a great interview. That is part one. I'm following up with part two of this podcast next Tuesday, where I'm going to take the investment angle of this. I'm going to break down all the stocks that are setting us up for what's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar tsunami of money coming into the healthcare industry and upending it like nothing we've seen before. So without further ado, Dr. Daniel Karlsberg. It's official. Mark Chaikin just went live with the biggest prediction of his career. A new wave of volatility is coming for the stock market, and investors need to act immediately. Mark's prediction is based on an indicator that has only triggered a handful of times in the last 72 years, and with a 100% success rate for predicting where stocks will go next. During Mark's 50-year career, he's worked alongside some of the biggest investors in history, including Paul Tudor Jones and Michael Steinhardt. In fact, Mark invented one of Wall Street's most popular indicators for picking stocks, still used by hedge funds, banks, and brokerage sites, and today found in every Bloomberg terminal on the planet. Now, Mark's inviting you to watch his brand new event as he explains exactly what the next wave of volatility will look like and where it will send stocks in the coming weeks. He's even sharing one of his favorite ideas free for those who tune in. He says this idea could create bigger gains than anything he's used his power gauge system for until now, by turning the coming market volatility to your advantage. But Mark says you must act today before more volatility hits the market. To watch his newest prediction in full, go to ChaikinEvent2023.com. That's ChaikinEvent2023.com. All right, folks, as I mentioned, I'm having my personal doctor on. We're ready to give a little bit of background of where he comes from and where he is today. He's with us right now. So thank you so much, Dr. Karlsberg, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down with us.
Yeah, happy to be here, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
So just to kind of set up a little bit of how our paths crossed about 2 years ago, I was doing some research on longevity. Obviously, a lot of it had to do with the stock market. But a lot of it also had to do, Dr. Karlsberg, with my own personal health. You know, now being in my mid-40s, having some bad family history, heart disease on both sides, mother and father, heart attacks in their 40s and some in the 30s, and grandparents. My father at 50 had a massive heart attack. Thank God he's still here. And then just kind of, trying to be a healthier person and realizing that a big step in taking care of yourself is being preventative. A lot of our medical system, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of going in when you're sick and just kind of treating your sickness, not actually creating health involved in it. I know it's changing, but we have a long ways to go. So when I went into the Princeton Longevity Clinic the first time, almost 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, I was blown away. I remember walking away. I was also scared to death. I won't lie to you, because I'm thinking to myself, if they're doing a full body scan, or doing a heart scan, every blood test under the sun. I had a brain MRI that time I went in. I'm running on treadmills. I'm like, I'm in pretty good health, Dr. Karlsberg, but damn, they're going to find something at 45 years old. Now 47, I will be happy to say that I just went there last month, still looking pretty good, clean bill of health. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how the Princeton Longevity Clinic came about? And the word longevity tends to be used a lot of different ways. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what longevity means to the Princeton Longevity Clinic and yourself?
Yeah, well, that's a great place to start. And I think you hit on something very important there in terms of just, let's talk about this word longevity. First of all, working at the Princeton Longevity Center is a true privilege. Being able to practice the medicine the way that we do things here is quite an honor. And this really comes down to getting what I call actionable medical information, meaning data and a data set that we can work with, do something about, or sometimes, have big insights with. There's no real shortage of the ability to get data out there, but separating kind of the noise from the data when you're talking about medicine becomes really, really important if you're then trying to diagnose things or actually have an impact or actually change outcomes. And so I think at the core of it, for me, what the word longevity means is creating a data set that's actionable, that's trackable over time, and that has the ability to change an outcome. And that's really kind of the fundamental, I think, principle of what we do here in our center. And that extends itself into a lot of areas. I'm by training, I do internal medicine and cardiology, and certainly within cardiology, my niche is cardiac imaging and preventive cardiology. But with a focus on longevity in the sense of actionable data, we're able to collect a lot of data across the board and walk away with some really unbelievable things sometimes.
Let me ask you this. Do you think what you do at Princeton Longevity Clinic and other similar clinics, do you think it will be for the masses at some point in the near future? Have we got to the scale that we can do that, or are we still just not cost effective enough? Or is there maybe insurance companies holding it back?
Well, yeah, I mean, this gets to what you were talking about in terms of healthcare systems. We certainly have a healthcare system in this country and in most developed worlds that tends to be more reactionary as opposed to forward thinking and preventive. All the testing that we do in our centers is generally widely available. Really, the ability to kind of come in, get it concisely done, get it cleanly done, and then in one day turn it around and have the expertise and the advice and speak with the physician on hand, and kind of separating the temporal relationship in healthcare is probably where most of the value comes into play. But we do screening that again becomes guideline directed and actionable to a way that enables us to create deeper insights and then better outcomes down the road.
Yeah, I will say one of the probably one of the nicest things, if not the nicest thing about it is, you go there, you get all your images throughout the day. You do your run on a treadmill. You meet with the exercise psychologist or physiologist, I believe he is.
Yep.
A dietitian, and the best part is when you leave at the end of the day, 4 p.m. or whatever it is, you have all the blood work that you did throughout the day. Everything, all the imaging is within hours and it's done. I mean, there's nothing more scary to me as a hypochondriac is doing all this stuff and waiting weeks to hear back from somebody what the hell the results were. So it's really nice to actually see that and walk away. And I got to tell you, both times I get my bag and I walk to the nearest bar and I have a glass of wine, because it is a hell of a relief walking out of there. Probably good or bad. I'll probably end up there having a glass of wine afterwards, but it is really nice. And it's something that I got to tell you, before going there, you read about things and it almost seems like science fiction. So, you being a cardiologist, a world-renowned cardiologist, in my opinion, obviously you've worked on a lot of groundbreaking issues when it comes to the heart. One thing that I thought was fascinating, and I showed this at a speech about 2 years ago after I went, is an image of my heart. So I'd love to maybe show everybody out there my actual heart. And some of our viewers, they don't like me because I don't like gold. Other things may not think I have a heart, but let's show them, Dr. Karlsberg, that I actually have a heart, and kind of talk through what we're seeing here and how you use this.
Sure. No, Matt, you have a heart. I would say that you have a heart of gold. That's not financial advice, by the way. I wouldn't say go invest in gold, but you certainly have a heart of gold. When we get into really cardiovascular imaging, in where we are today in 2023, probably the single most powerful tool that we have in the world of cardiovascular imaging is a CT scan. And some people might disagree with me, and different types of images, different modalities of images can create different value, and we look for different things. But really, and this is actually now recognized in the guidelines from the American College of Cardiology, really probably one of the most powerful tools would be what's called a CT angiogram. And that's what this is. And so this is essentially what we call a volume rendering from a CT scan. In this picture right here, we've basically taken everything out except Matt's heart. And this is actually how your heart looks. We, of course, add color to it, but all of the little details that you can see here come from getting the scan done. And it's a bit of a process. There's a protocol. We sometimes slow the heart rate down a little bit so we can get still pictures. Remember, we're taking really pictures of what I like to say, and when I teach this stuff to cardiology fellows, we're trying to get a still picture of a moving target in the dark. That's really what's going on. And so we need the right setup. We need the right heart rate control. And when we do that, we're able to see all of this detail. And so in general, without getting too deep into the world of cardiac anatomy and cardiac physiology, the heart is basically a muscle. And the muscle is what contracts and supplies blood then to the entire body. And that muscle is fed by these coronary arteries. And there are three kind of major, what we call epicardial coronary arteries. This one over here is the right coronary artery with all of its branching points. This one over here is the circumflex artery, and this one's called the LAD artery. And typically where heart attacks happen is actually in these little arteries. So when we talk about a heart attack or risk of heart attack or plaque, or you have someone who's had a balloon or a stent or an angioplasty or even a bypass surgery, this is all referring to the disease process within this 2 or 3 millimeter space, not a very big space, but a really critical space. Because if the heart muscle does not have an adequate supply of blood, the heart muscle dies. And so the power of this technology is that we're able to see not only these arteries and where they go, but we're able to get tremendous detail into the existence of plaque and finding plaque early on. And that's a prime example of what I call actionable data, whether that means then we want to give you medications or lower cholesterol, all the way up to, I've had people come into my office who seem well, not a lot of symptoms, and then the next step is actually a bypass surgery. So it's not all that common, let's say. That wouldn't be the most, the daily thing that I see, but that's what this technology provides. So it's really a different world as we get into this advanced world of cardiovascular imaging. And by the way,
not to cut you off real quick, Dr. Karls, but my father was as healthy as can be at his early 50s, so 15 years ago, let's say, and all of a sudden one day had a massive heart attack. I know we can't say for certain, but I can imagine if he went to see you or somebody and do this test on them, likelihood of them seeing something prior to that would have been really high. And, he was lucky somebody was around him. If he was alone, he was a dead man, so I'm just curious as to, is truly a lifesaver, I assume.
Yeah. Really in terms of having a heart attack, where the vast majority of heart attacks actually come from is plaque and plaque rupture. So when this, I'm showing a slide here, I hope you guys can see this, but when we talk about a heart attack, what a heart attack typically is in 90 to 95% of scenarios, it's what we call acute plaque rupture. And so plaque comes in different forms. Typically, plaque starts, we think, with an inflammatory process at the endothelial border, and this process occurs slowly but surely over time. Different types of cells get kind of connected into the cell wall, and mostly LDL cholesterol starts to form plaque. And as this plaque gets made, your body has a tendency to calcify the plaque. It makes the plaque hard. And that becomes part of the cornerstone of how we image the heart. We look for different types of plaque. We look for calcified and hardened plaque. And then we also look for non-calcified plaque. And non-calcified plaque, which has a tendency to break or shift or move, is typically where heart attacks come from. So, in reality, the concept that heart attacks come out of the blue is a little bit flawed. And that's where kind of this type of imaging really enables us to be ahead of the game and ahead of the curve. I can't say for sure if your father had come to me, we definitely would have found something, but at the right time, it's entirely plausible and probable that some of the folks that I've seen over the course of time have had a different outcome than what your father had.
So let me ask you this. I know the last two times we went in, we found a little plaque in one of my arteries. I don't know if we have that image or not to show that, but it was pretty amazing how you were able to zoom in and show me exactly where that little bit of plaque was, and know basically if that was something that's a major concern right now or not, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so when you look at the statistics of this, to back up for a second, what you have to realize is that plaque formation probably is actually a very slow process. And the disease process occurs over years, half decades, and decades. By the age of 45 years old, probably around 50% of men have made some plaque. And whether that's calcified plaque and hardened plaque or non calcified plaque is really important to understand. You've made a very, very tiny amount of calcified plaque, which really kind of is commensurate for your age. And we can say with this type of imaging that really nothing about it is high risk in nature. So that's really how we're able to kind of move the needle when it comes to finding the more dangerous type of scenarios.
So looking ahead, first of all, how long has this technology been around that this like type of software we're using right now, the 3D software?
Yeah, great question. This is really an advancement of the field of cardiovascular imaging, probably over, if you go back to kind of the basic research in the calcium score, really the late 1980s into the early 1990s. There was a boom in the technology and really the development of CT scanners moving from 32 slice to 64 slice all the way up to where we are today. So this is really a product over the last 20 and 30 years that not only the technology is there, but actually more importantly, the science is there. Actually, for the first time in history, when the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association and actually the European Heart Association came out with what we call the guidelines. These are the massive, documents that really pool all the scientists together, gather all the specialists together. And for the first time in just 2021, the CT angiogram has really developed a new category of classification, which is a class 1 level of evidence A to find heart disease, obstructive heart disease in the right type of patient. And so what that means is that this type of test is now widely accepted as being very, very, very good at what it's supposed to do, which is catch things early on. And it's not always to say that it's right for everyone. There's a lot of different types of tests out there. There can be a nuclear stress test and a stress EKG, and sometimes those are used in conjunction. It still depends on the scenario. But to answer your question, it's really a product of the last 40 years, if you go probably back through the initial science of it. And really in the last 20 years, we're getting pictures like this has been feasible and replicable over, different centers and in different organizations.
So then what's next, Dr. Karlsberg? We see artificial intelligence come into this. Obviously, you're using your eyes to look at this, but is this something that we could put in, maybe compared to other similar hearts to help, detect something maybe that the human eye can't see? Where do we go next?
Yeah, we're actually already there. The future of this field is going to get more granular. There are a few companies, and we've been doing some of the research involved in that from the beginning in terms of moving that needle forward in terms of granulation, and where some of that actually is getting more granular with quantifying and then qualifying the type of plaque that we see. And where we're moving is away from a field of, a level 3 expert reader looking at an artery on a screen and kind of my interpretation, to using augmented reality and artificial intelligence through algorithms, taking these images through algorithms and walking away with the millimeters cubed of calcified plaque and non-calcified plaque. That's an organization called Clearly, which has now gained a large footprint in the world of cardiovascular imaging. There's a few others out there. And so really it's the disease is being detected earlier. The quantification of the disease is better. And what that translates to is earlier interventions, less of kind of a reactive approach, and being ahead of the game when it comes to the knowledge. And so my philosophy always is this, that, there's the knowledge is, and understanding exactly what's going on with you in terms of knowledge is really important. Sometimes that creates anxiety, as you express, in terms of coming into the clinic, but it's almost never a bad scenario that we have the data.
It's funny you say that because now when I get heartburn, I don't think I'm having a heart attack because I feel like my heart if the odds are gonna be very small based off all the stuff we've seen. And, a lot of people told me when I go, Matt, I can't believe you're going there. Do you wanna know if you have cancer? Do you wanna know if you have heart disease?" I'm like, "Of course I wanna know
Yeah,
because we can fix it most
yeah.
likely, and if you can't, you can't, but I'd rather know." But there's a large part of the population, Dr. Karlsberg, that doesn't wanna know. They're like, "You know what? I'm gonna live the best life I can live, and when I'm time to go, it's time to go." I don't agree with that, but there's a large part of the population doing that.
Well, yeah, everyone's going to make their own decisions and preferences. But where we are with this technology, first of all, the vast majority of what we're able to diagnose can be done non-invasively, meaning we're not sticking catheters into your heart to understand the coronary arteries at this stage. We're not doing biopsies, just to do biopsies. So that can be a fear aspect of this in terms of, is it going to be painful? And the vast majority of stuff we do is not painful and very, very safe to do. The other part about this is just having the information. And yeah, it's a little bit like, sometimes taking your head out of the sand, but almost universally, and I'm not a medical oncologist, but the earlier you find something that looks like cancer, the better the outcome is going to be. And it really doesn't matter if you're talking about breast cancer or lung cancer or colon cancer. And that's part of, the reason we also do screening colonoscopies. So I can totally understand where people come from with that, but when you come down to the practice of it, I think actually most people do want to understand what's going on. It can be nerve wracking, but we're here to help walk you through that.
Yeah, and I will say, it doesn't hurt being on what floor are you
We're on the
staying on?
71st floor. Yeah,
It's the 71st floor of the Freedom Tower, I guess they call that,
that's
the New
right.
World Trade Center. So
Yep.
it's not bad when unless you're afraid of heights, and you'd really be screwed. But as long as you're not afraid of heights, I mean, it's not a bad place to get good news. And hopefully one day we don't have to have bad news, but you never know. And part of what else I did at the clinic as well, obviously, is the full body scan. So why don't you tell a little bit about that? Because I think to me, that was probably the biggest thing. The heart, I'm fascinated by, but my big thing was, seeing so many people, not that I know, but you hear of my age now in the mid 40s, finding out all of a sudden they have stage 4 cancer and not knowing they had it for so many years. Maybe just a little ailment and they push it off. Next thing obviously it's usually doesn't end well. But a little bit about the scan that I
Yeah.
do that they offer there and how that detects cancer.
Yeah. Well, so it's a little bit, to put it bluntly, we put the cart before the horse. Most cancer actually turns out is detected on some type of image. And in a lot of scenarios, someone will present to a clinic or an office, maybe have a nagging cough or this or that. And all the way up to the point where sometimes someone's coughing up blood. And then, of course, we get an image. What we do at our centers is a little bit put the cart before the horse and get really actually aggressive about the preventive side of things. So by imaging across the body, we're able to see the thyroid, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, pancreas. We see a prostate in a man. We see the ovaries in the woman. And certainly not everything that we see on a CT scan ends up being cancer. But sometimes we do find things that is you otherwise, of course, want to know about in terms of finding cancer. And in many scenarios, it ends up being very, very early on, if that's what it is. I always tell patients, and we walk people through this, just because we found this or that, or a pulmonary nodule or a ditzel on an image, does not mean that you have cancer. And oftentimes we get follow up imaging or we follow things over time. But certainly creating a roadmap and a baseline becomes critical if you're going to be then comparing things down the road.
Yeah, to me, when I did this, I was excited about it, and I still excites me talking about it now. Is you know, you put so much time and effort to make money. Obviously, a lot of people watching this are in the stock market, and I'll talk about stocks at the end that are related to this preventative type healthcare. But you put so much time into that, and your family and everything else. Your car, I don't have a car, but people put so much time, make sure their tires are rotated and all that kind of crap. But then you can't enjoy any of that without having this body. And a lot of times I feel like we don't put the time into our body. And I'm not saying everybody's going to go out and work out and eat better, because that's not realistic, but at least let's know what's going on and be preventative when it comes to that. You do your oil change for your car right on time, right? You don't miss that, but you don't want to think about what's going on here. So I guess my lead-off question from that is, at what point do you think that this can be economically scalable, that the masses can get to it? And a second question on top of that, Dr. Karlsberg, is there a point where, if this type of imaging is the norm and liquid biopsies for cancer detection are the norm, do we almost eradicate cardiac issues? Do we almost eradicate cancer at that point?
Well, that's an interesting comment. When it comes to eradicating heart disease, I mean, the earlier you find heart disease, the more you can change the outcome down the road. I'm actually involved with a research organization, and we're actually starting to get into looking at genetic polymorphisms of the genetic side of what creates heart disease, which is a whole vast world of what we're now starting to understand. We're also, through that organization, which is the Cardiovascular Research Foundation of Southern California, involved getting into trials for actually medications for gene editing. So we can not only find these genes, but then start to edit these genes. And that's where you can start to get into this world of really making a dent in terms of heart disease and potentially eradicating the disease. Your other point of, how to make this scalable, or where are we with this? Again, like I said kind of earlier on, a lot of this technology is available. Cardiovascular imaging can be done in many scenarios. It's a different conversation if you're talking about insurance coverage for it, and that's all speaks a little bit more to the systems of healthcare that we have. Unfortunately, the systems of healthcare that we have don't always allow us to be using the best and brightest and newest technologies. That doesn't mean that it's not available. Things in medicine, and as they kind of rightfully so, we want to go fairly slowly with changes in medicine. But like when I referenced the guidelines changing, that's a monumental shift for where the science is in this. And liquid biopsies and the Galleri tests and looking at methylated DNA is probably part of that. In some scenarios, that actually is the standard of care. I'm on a board with a pancreatic surgeon named Diane Simeone. She is over at NYU, and she's running an organization called Trova now, with the goal of really early detection of pancreatic cancer. And the standard in that type of scenario is getting the genetic testing. Right now, where we are with things, is that going to be available? If you're going to your primary care doctor in the middle of Wichita, Kansas, not to harp on Kansas, but out into kind of more rural areas, is that going to be available? Maybe not. But where we are in the science of things, many times these things are available, and it's about seeking them out and being proactive to get them.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of time. People, again, spend time on things they probably shouldn't be spending time on. And one of our firms that we follow, a research firm called ARC Investment, they have a bunch of ETFs out there. Kathy Wood's the head of it. People love or hate her, but they put together every year what they call big ideas, and they always have a section on healthcare. And just some of the numbers that came across, one is on precision therapy. So basically, patient centric, targets a root cause of disease, not just the symptoms, kind of based off your genetics, how to treat it. They look at the enterprise value of that it's around 500 billion right now. That by 2030, it's a $3 trillion market value. I mean, that's 6x in 7 years. I mean, that's pretty amazing. So, and I could list 10 other different areas within gene editing, within next generation sequencing, all types of stuff. A lot of it has to do with genetics. A lot of it has to do with artificial intelligence, a lot of convergence of these technologies coming together. But the numbers, Dr. Karlsberg, are enormous. I mean, you're getting into $1 trillion markets out there. That has to upend our medical system at some point, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, the question is, are we going to able to translate that into delivery of care? But no question that the scale of economies is going to be huge. And probably a prime example of that might be sequencing the human genome, which, back in the, early 90s, mid 90s, and even before that took if not dozens of thousands of dollars, and now you have the ability to do that, on almost on demand for maybe hundreds of dollars. And so you're going to see the trickle down effects of that as you move forward. The question is, are those things going to impact the delivery of care and how we and kind of going back to what I was mentioning before, create actionable change and actionable information. And some of it will, and some of it won't.
Yeah, it's amazing. I follow lots of different places, and you can now go get your genome basically sequenced for I think less than $300 now.
Yeah.
And remember, I'm trying to find the number, but when they originally did that, it took them I think less than they thought. It took them several years, and it's like 2 years less. But I can't remember the number, but I'm gonna find it. But it was, if I'm not mistaken, it hit $1 billion, if not more, for the first one. And keep in mind that was 2 decades ago. 2 or 3 decades ago, how things have changed the technology from that down to a Joe Schmo like me can go get it done for a couple $100.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so that begs a question, like, where do you see cardiology in 10 to 15 years from now?
I think that cardiology in 10 to 15 years will continue to get more granular and continue to get better at finding disease earlier on. It's my hope that all the technology that we have and I'm blessed to have at my fingertips continues to trickle into different areas. To some extent, I'm involved in that in terms of teaching fellows and teaching young cardiologists coming out the importance of this type of technology and how to do it and how to interpret things. It's a lumbering, slow growing thing that I think in the next 10 years, if we can penetrate deeper with early detection of disease, higher awareness of disease in all segments, whether that's women's heart disease, which is now we recognize as being a little bit unique from the typical pattern of men's heart disease and oftentimes underdiagnosed, all the way to the more novel areas that we touched on earlier here. I think that the field of cardiology really is going to, hopefully over the course of the next 10 years or even my lifetime, change dramatically and enable us to really have different outcomes.
So just so I got that number, so I can give it to you, Dr. Karlsberg, that original human genome that they sequenced took 13 years and about $3 billion.
There you go.
I mean, $3 billion down to $300 is just,
Yeah.
it's fascinating to think about that. And, I'm super excited about the future of healthcare and medicine. And I think most people are, but most people, it's a weird topic because they don't want to talk about cancer or heart disease because they don't want to feel immortal. Right. So it's tough to talk about. But again, I follow a lot of people who write about longevity as far as not quite exactly what you're doing, more, kind of taking certain types of drugs that are more experimental for longevity. But they do talk about some stuff that's backed up by science and that kids born today could realistically live a healthy 100 years. And it could be the norm.
Yeah,
And
I think that some of those things I always caution my patients, or in kind of our practice, it's a little bit with a grain of salt. I think that making sure that what you see in terms of bench research as you get into kind of the preventive world or longevity type things, what you see in terms of bench research, as in the biochemical pathway of this and that, and using this off-label type of thing for this or that, doesn't always translate into the clinical outcome. And so really, again, the key becomes actionable information that's actually going to make a difference. And that's still an evolving field, but stuff is coming up all the time. But making sure that it gets from the bench to the patient, that's a long, long, long road. And in most scenarios, there are checkpoints along the way, whether that's the FDA or the guideline committees or the scientific bodies that kind of look at things. It does remain important to make sure that we're going to have an intended outcome from whatever we're trying to do.
Yeah, and you're talking, we're talking about AI a little bit, and trying to pull up the stat here. According to Deloitte, it costs about $2 billion to develop a new drug, and it takes about 10 years, give or take. And that is if it's successful. I mean, there's many of them that are never approved by the FDA. So they lost
many more drugs that are not successful than are successful. Yeah.
And now there's quite a few companies, and I'll mention those at the end of the show, that are using artificial intelligence in the drug discovery process. And we've seen, with quantum computing on the cusp of becoming reality in the next 5 years or so, being able to do numbers that once took literally thousands of years to run, with the computers we have today taking it down to a half a day. I have to think that, okay, all this 10 years of potential drug discovery can be done in literally weeks, if months or weeks, with quantum computing running through all the data that we already have.
Yeah, I think that that's probably one of the best areas where AI has, well, let's say, the biggest hope. If you look at big trials or combing through big amounts of data to take all these variables of an individual, oftentimes in these trials, we want to parse that down and select this type of individual with this type of qualifications. I think that artificial intelligence, and just speaking broadly, is very, very, very well positioned to do that. And I think that the ability to then take that and get research done faster, parse through the data, organize the data better, and then get to the understanding whether this drug A is going to work or drug B is going to work, or that whole process. I think that the implications of AI there are huge, absolutely enormous.
And also, kind of off the topic you're talking about, I remember hearing a speech a few years ago. It might have been one of my colleagues who's a doctor here. I can't remember who it was, but it might have been in a book. But talking about, okay, Matt, you're mid-40s, you're a healthy guy, you fit this quality, you're Caucasian, you're this, you're this, you're this, you have this disease, this is what you should take based off these factors. Not my makeup, my genetic makeup, but because I fall into I'm a male, I'm 45, I'm in good shape, this and this. That's ridiculous to me, because you put a room of 50 people that meet those qualifications, our bodies are all very different, are they not? So if you can meld AI with genomics going forward, holy smokes, and you have that precision medicine I talked about.
Yeah, precision medicine is certainly gives me butterflies even to think about in terms of where it could go. Just making sure that, again, the hype is not overdriven in terms of what you're going to see tomorrow in the clinic is really important to kind of set those expectations. But if you look at just medicine in terms of where we've been, and if you want to take that lens and look backwards, over the last 100 years is really where we would say modern medicine has begun, in terms of anesthesia, surgeries where you're not, the mortality is not in the 80% range, meaning, there's an 80% chance you're not going to live through the surgery, to where we are now doing routine things. Extrapolate that to the cardiovascular space, and we put in new heart valves through the leg sometimes without even opening up the chest. You leave the hospital the next day. So the possibilities there, when you apply that to genomic sequencing and really individualized medicine, I think the future is bright, absolutely bright.
Yeah, I mean, I read all these books, and I'm the furthest thing from a doctor. I went pre-med, Dr. Karlsberg. It lasted about a month, but I was pre-med. and the fact that I've learned over the years, like, I don't mind getting needles and getting IVs, but I see somebody with a bad cut, I'm running. I really, it wasn't meant for me. So I'm glad I got out early. I didn't realize I was that scared of seeing people.
Well, that's okay.
Hurt.
Some people have the same reaction to looking at, the markets and graphs that
that's
put up on your
very
show.
true. Sometimes I think it'd be easier to look at that than look at the markets as of late. Right. But yeah, I mean, I think everything you're doing is amazing. And one more topic I want to touch on, and you and I talked about this off camera, and this kind of speaks to how big the healthcare system is and the future of it, is Amazon buying One Medical, which in about a $3.9 billion deal. You want to talk about maybe why Amazon would do that? Like, why are they jumping in? And is it the data they want? Or are they actually going to be healthcare provider, you think, at some point?
Well, I think probably a little bit of both, and I don't know for sure, but I would suspect a little bit of both. We've seen Amazon make moves in the healthcare space before. We've seen companies like Google, who continues to make kind of moves in the healthcare space before, whether that's Verily or whether that's getting into finding diabetes, but just by a contact lens. I think that was a Verily project. So it would be speculative for me to say, why Amazon wants to do this. But, to me, as someone in the healthcare space, I can say that type of, I look at that and I go, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Amazon is a huge company, a huge footprint, and One Medical is a big company with a very big footprint in terms of the primary care space. I would call it huge. And so, I can't speak to the business aspect of it, but I'm sure that their interest in One Medical comes both from the ability to enter the healthcare space, maybe harness the data, maybe do things with that. Dealing with healthcare data is tricky and challenging, and that's a big Pandora's box sometimes. I think one thing for sure that deal really shows is Amazon's intentions and their
Mhm.
commitment to the healthcare space, whether that is for their own needs and their employees and just providing healthcare from a business cost perspective, or the evolution and being innovative in the space and what they can do potentially as a partner.
Yeah, and when I see Amazon and Google, some of the greatest companies over the last 50, 100 years, maybe ever, moving in with big money into the space, tells me that the opportunity we have there as well to kind of disrupt it. It's due for some disruption, which I like. I want to see disrupted a bit. Before they go down to Karlsberg, tell me, the Princeton Longevity Clinic, obviously, I've gone twice. I'm going to continue to go every time that I'm supposed to, on my schedule. I think it's worth every freaking penny I spend. That being said, some people won't never do it because that's just not who they are. Who is this perfect for? To come see you and your staff. Who is this really set up for?
Yeah, I think that someone who's proactive about their health, someone who's interested, someone who wants to take ownership of their health. We craft kind of our evaluations pretty carefully to make sure that we're going to be able to answer every question that comes up. It really becomes my mission that we can answer every question before you leave our office. And sometimes there's follow-up stuff that we need to do to get to the bottom of things. But I would say the demographic is someone who has that mindset, who has that mindset of ownership, of being proactive, and really wants to kind of separate sometimes the noise from the actionable data, and really someone that wants to obtain the actionable data for either their peace of mind or to get to an answer to a question.
Yeah, and I also want to throw in there too, as endorsement is there's something to be said about going in. I believe you have 2 or 3 patients a day in the office total, if
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
we're
Yeah,
we're 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 certainly not a volume-based practice, and
yeah,
really that's not a reflection that I twiddle around my thumbs all day. But it's I'll use the analogy of a swan moving across a lake, which looks graceful on the outside, but we're moving and bustling on the inside to get everything done.
yeah,
Really,
yeah,
when you and you've benefited from this now a few times, but when you sit down to really say, are there any other questions? What else can I answer? Does this make sense? This takes time. It's
yeah.
not. It's not a here you go, everything's fine type of thing. But really getting to the core of stuff, and actually, that's probably the most gratifying part about doing medicine this way is being able to really guide someone through, educate them, and that typically fosters into this kind of idea of ownership of your healthcare.
Mhm.
Probably a lot of your listeners take a great deal of, I should hope so, take a great deal of ownership in their portfolios and want to know each trade and this and that. And it can be the same way with your health. And the more you know about stuff, the more connected you are to it. And that also helps the outcomes down the road, whether that's medication adherence and sticking to the plan or following up and doing stuff like that.
Yeah, and I will tell the audience, I've had a few issues over the last 2 years, and I've texted Dr. Karlsberg on a Friday night once, and instead of texting back, he goes, "Matt, let me give you a call." And he actually called me, I think, after you put your kids to bed. So, I mean, it's there's something to be said about that personal
Yeah.
connection. And again, if you don't have your health, you have nothing. I mean, I'm an investor for my life, but you also have to invest in you, not just the market. So,
There you
to
go.
me, I highly recommend anybody that
Yeah,
that
there
is
you go. It's
interested
the
in it.
ultimate ROI. I think you
It,
said
it,
that
it
one.
is the ultimate ROI. Yes, you said it to me when I was in there. I said that's the perfect title for a podcast, and now we're doing it, sitting down here. But it is the ultimate ROI because there's nothing you could have without your health at the end of the day. But we'll put a link up down below if anybody's interested. Please reach out to the Princeton Longevity Clinic, and even if you just have questions, I think you should reach out because I've had a lot of people that I've talked to go there, and I've been very happy. So as happy as I am as well. So I definitely recommend it. And again, Dr. Karlsberg, thank you so much for everything you've done for me, for the healthcare industry in general. Keep it up, and I'll talk to you very soon. Hopefully not too soon, but hopefully I'll talk to you soon.
Whenever you need it, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you so much.
Opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the contributor and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Stansberry Research, its parent company, or affiliates.